Hey guys, TommyBryson here, and there are so many books about investing. Books that are classics for investors and beginners, books that are about speculation, books that are about exactly how to copy Warren Buffett and do exactly what he does. But overall, guys, a lot of these books, they kind of become obsolete with time because investing is so progressive. But overall, these 5 lessons that I'm going to teach you in this video right here are lessons that stick with you for the long term when it comes to investing. And by the way, the difference from knowing these 5 lessons is not really just being a beginner, but really understanding how the entire game actually works. It's kind of like playing a video game where all you do is mash the buttons. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't, but you don't really know the techniques of it. So once you know these 5 things right here, it's gonna make this game a lot more easier to understand and to comprehend and to actually do successfully and to get started when it comes to investing in the stock market. This video is for beginners. So I hope this video actually makes sense to you because I'm gonna break this video down in a way where it feels like everything in this video is common sense, and that's done on purpose, okay? And it takes a lot of work to make complex things common sense, but I think I've done a good job in this video. And as always, guys, do me a favor and smash the like button. It helps out with the channel. And on top of that, also, if you're new here, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified. I upload videos every single week on making money, investing, and passive income. So you don't want to miss out on that. So make sure you also click the bell when you click subscribe so you get notified when I post some of these videos. Now, the very first thing, guys, that I got to break down here, the very first lesson is all about the actual stock market. And there is this very powerful metaphor when it comes to the stock market and how to look at it. There are a lot of books out there written about, hey, when you look at the stock market, look for these trends, look for this to happen, try to use a formula here and there. But no one has been able to successfully predict the stock market like ever for a long time, so it's not really possible. But overall, the metaphor that very good investors use that you can find in this book in chapter 8, if I'm not mistaken, is basically the metaphor of Mr. Market. Look into the stock market as if it was, for example, a manic depressive person. It kind of sounds crazy, but it's kind of real, okay? When you go to the stock market, what do you see? A bunch of prices. People are willing to give you this much money to buy your stock from you, or they're asking you to pay this much money to buy the stock from them. That's what's going on, okay? So when you look at it as just, for example, Mr. Market, it's kind of like you have someone that on some days, they're willing to give you a stock for a very low price. On some days, they're willing to pay you a lot more money for a stock you bought for a certain price, okay? That's what the entire idea is. Now, in the short term, when you look at the stock market, it's not, for example, a weighing machine, meaning that everything in there is worth what it's supposed to be worth. No, it's more like a voting machine, meaning that in the short term, it's all about what's the most popular thing right now. What is the next thing, okay? So that's kind of how you view it. So when you are being an investor, you have to use common sense. You have to think for yourself, and you can't rely on what the stock market is basically doing, because overall what you want to do is use the stock market to your benefit. So for example, when you buy a stock or when you're looking to buy a stock, you use Mr. Market for your benefit. If he's basically offering you a massive discount on a stock, that's the time to buy. And if he's basically paying you a bunch of money for a stock, then that's obviously when you actually want to sell it to him. But if you bought something that you know is worth a good amount of money and he's not willing to pay you it, then you wait until he is, because over time, in the long term, the market is going to become a weighing machine. It's going to average things out. So here's a very real example that I want to share with you guys by the man himself, Warren Buffett. Now, in 1973, Warren Buffett bought the Washington Post. And back then, this stock, by the way, Washington Post, newspaper stuff, old people stuff, you know, but back then, newspapers were awesome. I don't read the newspaper. I don't think I ever read a newspaper in my entire life, honestly. Maybe once or twice, but I just don't read newspapers at all. And I don't even watch news either, by the way. Nothing positive on there. But overall, and if the news is big, it gets to me. It always gets to me. So overall, all right, stop with the drama stuff. Okay, so overall, 1973. He bought the Washington Post. Now, back then when he bought the company at a valuation of $100 million. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but back then, the price of the stock has sunk down so crazy. But just for example, a few months before or a few years back, the company was basically selling for $400 to $500 million. So it's kind of like saying, again, you have missed the market here, okay? Hey, this stock is worth $400 to $500 million. But today, I think it's worth $100 million. All of a sudden, but it's a company, it's a real company, okay? So Warren Buffett goes ahead, takes advantage, buys $11 million worth at a valuation of basically $100 million. That's around an 11% stake. And then just by sitting down and waiting from 1973 to 2007, I think it is, well, Warren Buffett turned that $11 million into around $1.4 billion. That's an over 10,000% return. And that's a real, legitimate investment story. If you want to look it up, look it up. But the idea is use the stock market to your advantage. Sometimes things are going to be so depressive out there. That's the time to buy. Sometimes people are going to be so excited and they're going to be basically paying crazy prices. The answer is that's not what you want to be buying, okay? You want to use that to your benefit to sell when the time comes, okay? But that's the idea. Look at the stock market as if it was Mr. Market. That is chapter 8 of this book, The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham. It's a great read. But again, most of the things in here, all the formulas and stuff like that, it's fun stuff to do, but investing is a lot more common sense than it is formula based, okay? Now, number 2, guys. This here is super duper important. And it's all about margin of safety. Now, this means that no matter how good of an investor you are, you have to understand that investment is not an exact science, it's more like an art. Now, let me explain why, okay? If me and you look at an investment and you try to analyze it, and you might not know how to analyze an investment right now. You might not know how to view an investment and say, well, I think this investment is worth that much. That's fine. But when you are able to do it, and you will be able to do it, the idea is that if me and you look at an exact same investment, I will come up with different numbers than you did. It's kind of like how people can appraise your house. You can have one appraiser come in and say, hey, your house is worth 100K. The other one says, well, your house is worth 110K. What do? You take the highest one, obviously, okay? You don't be an idiot, okay? Take the highest one. But the idea is, same thing with investing. It's not an exact science. It's more, for example, like an art, because there are certain things that you take a look at that other people will not take a look at and will not consider. For example, the way Warren Buffett invests and the way Benjamin Graham invests or used to invest are very different. He can look at things, for example, like brand value and say, hey, I think Coca-Cola is worth this much because the brand is so powerful. But when you look at, for example, Benjamin Graham, he says, well, it's cool stuff, but I care about the actual numbers, the actual assets, and that's all I care about, nothing else, okay? So different investors have different perspectives, and that's what I mean. Now, how does this correlate? Or how does this make sense, for example, when it comes to margin of safety? It basically means that no matter how smart you are as an investor, you need to have a margin of safety. And what that means is basically is having a little room for error to make sure that if you're wrong, you don't end up losing all your money. Now, this means, for example, let's say you want to buy Tesla, all right? And Tesla right now is selling for around $747 billion. And let's say you want to buy it, it goes down a little bit, and you're saying, hey, I want to buy it for $700 billion now. And by the way, when I use these big figures, I use them on purpose because I want you to think about investing not as if you're saying, hey, I'm going to buy a $700 share of Tesla. No, I want you to think about buying the entire company overall, because as an investor, that's basically what you're doing, but you're just basically buying a small fraction of it, right? But you're buying a piece of the entire company. So always analyze it as if you were buying the entire thing. That's the idea. So if the company right now is selling for $747 billion and you buy it at $700 billion, you're only basically having a margin of safety there of like 7 to 8%, meaning that If you're wrong by that small margin, you can lose a lot of money. So the best thing to do is to use that Warren Buffett example, and you won't always find those deals, but to say, hey, this company is worth 400 million or 500 million, and I'm buying it for $100 million. That means that even if I'm off by 20% or 50%, and that adds an extra $50 million, okay, it is still worth $400 million. So if everything goes wrong and the company has to be liquidated, sold off, all parts of it, I'm still gonna make a bunch of money. That's what you wanna have in your investments always, a margin of safety. Never think that a company is too good or so great that ignoring this rule can just be like done. No, always buy with a margin of safety, just in case, because that's how investing works. And by the way, another famous example is, for example, when you get into an elevator and it says, hey, maximum pounds is 10,000, maximum people is like 7, like impossible that so many people are gonna weigh that much, right? So that's why they do it. You always wanna have enough room in there. So if a lot of people gonna get in the elevator, it's still not gonna go like crazy and everyone's gonna, so that's margin of safety, just in case. Now, the third lesson is what I've been hinting at a lot while you've been watching this video. And it's all about how stocks are pieces of businesses, okay? So that means obviously that a stock is not just, for example, something on your phone. No, it's a real legitimate business out there, okay? So that means, for example, whenever you buy Apple stock, for example, you know that it's not just, for example, a stock there, but this is a real company with a building, with employees, with managers, with customers, with products, with competitors, with just, for example, a bunch of stuff, okay? So the idea is when you're buying a stock, it's not just saying, hey, what I used to do, by the way, which is very stupid when I first started, because everyone does the exact same thing. It's funny because everyone does, but it's like you kind of look at the stock and you're like, well, this stock is selling for $10. Last year was $5, and they think that next year it's gonna be 15 bucks, so I'm gonna buy it. You know what I mean? You just basically use the last price to tell you what you think the price might be later on. And by the way, that's called guessing, and not even like, for example, intelligent guessing. It's just pure guesswork. That's not what you want to do. So whenever you actually want to invest, if you want to be a real legitimate investor, you got to understand that to understand this stock, I gotta understand the company. And there is no way you're going to be able to understand every company, because there are thousands of companies out there in a bunch of different industries. And unless you are a person with a lot of money and a big team with a lot of information and people that are very smart around you that can understand, for example, hey, this team understands the airlines, this team understands, for example, the retail industry, you're not going to be able to be a great investor, because you need to focus, for example, on a part. Because again, you are investing into a stock, yes, but this is a real legitimate company with customers and products and everything else. Now, by the way, I'm going to be very controversial here and tell you this. A lot of the brokers that we see out there, for example, like Robinhood and just a lot of them overall, what they're doing now is, in a way, they're gamifying what it is to invest. So it kind of makes it kind of cool to buy, to sell, to trade. And you think that, for example, it's kind of cool because I can buy right now, I can sell later, make a good profit, take the money back. But investing is really like, you should have your hands in your pocket type of game and only take them out when you're actually ready to do something, and not try to sell back and forth. Because obviously when you buy and you sell, buy and sell, those are taxes. You don't want to do that either, okay? And you don't allow your investments to actually grow over time. But guess what? Brokers don't care about that stuff, because what they care about is basically you doing some form of activity, because they get paid not a percentage of your profits, they get paid by you doing something. When you sell, they get paid. When you buy, they get paid. It's all in those transactions. That's where they get paid. That's where they're making their money. And that's why the incentive is buy, sell, buy, sell. That's why the advertising is buy, sell, fast trade and fast this. I don't care if the broker I use takes, for example, 1 day to do a transaction, or lets me do, for example, 1 transaction a day. Like, I just don't care, because whenever I buy something, I'm buying it for the long term. I'm not gonna buy something to sell it tomorrow, because again, that's a game that I'm just not playing. And a lot of great investors, that's not the game that they play either. So again, remember, stocks are pieces of businesses. So whenever you're looking at a stock to buy, don't base it on the price is this. No, base it on, here's the business. Let's try to understand the business, and let's see exactly what this business is worth. A lemonade stand with $10 in inventory, with $100 in revenue, you might say, hey, this sounds like a pretty good business, right? Because it's getting such a high return on the assets it basically has, okay? That's how you gotta kind of start to analyze things, okay? And you use formulas to help you, to assist you. But there is no rule of thumb formula that gets you a price for a stock that you're gonna know always. It makes no sense, or else all the mathematicians in the world would be millionaires and we would all be poor, basically, okay? Now, number 4 is, there's this famous baseball example by Warren Buffett that I love, and he basically says that when you think about investing, think about it if you were basically playing baseball and you're down at the home base and you're next up to bat. Now, in real baseball, when you're about to bat the ball, you get basically 3 strikes, right? So if the pitcher sends the ball in the little strike zone or whatever, and it goes in there 3 times and you didn't swing, you're out. You're gone. But when it comes to investing, you can sit there and just wait until the ball goes exactly where you want it, because you don't have to take a swing until you're ready. Now, what I mean for this is basically, you can see a bunch of different opportunities, different companies coming by, but you only have to buy when you are 100% sure and confident in what you're actually going to do. And by the way, you see that, for example, Warren Buffett always gets a lot of flack for not investing into technology companies and missing out on Amazon, missing out on Microsoft. He should invest into Apple a long time ago, but the guy is still worth over $100 billion. And that basically means that when he did take a swing, it was worth it. It made him money, and that's what really matters. So the idea is, don't think that just because everyone else is investing into a bunch of different things that you're missing out on something. No, just wait until your pitch comes through, okay? And then you basically invest with confidence, because it's still gonna pay off. And investing, you only really need a solid 3 to 5 or 6 solid investments to make you very wealthy. And that's what I've noticed when I look at, for example, Warren Buffett, and see that most of his earnings, most of his money comes from a few solid investments. Now, although this example is pretty solid, and I could just end it right here, I do want to add another factor to it that I think Warren Buffett should have added to it. And it's basically that, yeah, you're down there, right? And you are about to bat the ball when it hits your sweet spot, and you are not going to get stroken out, right? Because you don't take a swing unless you actually are confident. But then on top of that, I would add 2 more layers to this. I would add a crowd behind you telling you, swing dummy, the ball is right there, swing dummy. And I would also add, for example, other batters that are next to you that are swinging and hitting the ball, And so in this example, there are a lot more factors, because when you are waiting for your investments, there's someone there telling you, you should be buying this. Or you're seeing, for example, in the news, this person got rich by doing this. So there's competition and other people doing the wrong things or taking risky swings and actually hitting it, and you might feel like you're missing out. And there's also other people telling you, you should be buying this, you should be buying that. So the idea is, when it comes to investing, you really have to think for yourself, and you really have to be risk averse, and you really have to be one of those people that are like, hey, I'm not gonna go with the crowd or against the crowd for the sake of the crowd. I'm just gonna be objective about what I'm doing. It's about using common sense and not just following what everybody else is doing. But don't be a contrarian. Those are people that, if the crowd is going left, I'm gonna go right. Why? Because they're going left. That's stupid, okay? Because if you would have done that when everyone was getting into the automobile business, and you would have been like, well, they're getting into the automobile business, I'm gonna go into the horse business because that's not what they're doing. Well, obviously, dummy, because that is gonna be done. We're gonna use cars now. So don't be a contrarian, be objective about your opinions and use common sense. Now, number 5, and the final example here, which is a very powerful one. And by the way, wait until the end of this video, because I'm gonna give you guys 2 more bonuses. So if you made it all the way here, comment down below bonus, so I know you made it all the way here, okay? Plus, it's a way for me to know that you are a real person and you're commenting, and I'm not commenting and replying to a bot, because it happens a lot now on YouTube. But number 5 is, it takes 20 years to get 20 years of experience. And whenever I heard that quote, it scared me a lot, because it's kind of crazy, right? Because you always want to read more books to gain more experience, but in reality, some things you can only gain through life, and that's something I'm learning a lot more. So when it comes to investing, one of the most important things is understanding your circle of competence. And what that means is, just like Warren Buffett, he's very good with banking stocks and retail and stuff like that, but you put, for example, a calculator with a screen on it and like a few apps on it, and he goes crazy. He just can't understand it, okay? Because technology is not his thing, and that's fine. So being a specialist in something can make you a lot of money. And if you're seeing, for example, in our society, when it comes to a surgeon, people specialize now in surgery, whether it's heart surgery, pancreas surgery, or plastic surgery. But then you have the nose specialist, you have the butt specialist, whatever it is. Specialists make a lot of money. So it's okay for you to learn to be a specialist in a certain sector of the stock market. So develop your circle of competence. And obviously in a perfect world, you could easily and surely keep increasing it. But at some point, it's a lot better just to focus on what you're very good at and just develop that and be very dominant in it. So that comes with a lot of experience, a lot of studying, a lot of learning. And don't forget that although investing is like a lot more common sense than it is like formulas and equations. And by the way, remember, this isn't, for example, college, where it's very nice to teach like formulas and so on to make things cohesive. It's investing. It's more of an art than it is, for example, it's science. But it doesn't mean that you have your opinions. No, there are valid ways to do it by people that have taught us for a very long time. So all those books in investing, they work. They're solid. Now, here's the bonus. You can't learn from the best, but here is the closest you can get to learning from the best. So I know if you're watching this video and you're still here watching this video, you're probably interested, for example, tell me, what can I go read to learn about investing? Number 1, I would read Warren Buffett's shareholder letters, and I would also read, well, not read, I would also watch, for example, his shareholder meetings. There is so much common sense investing information given out there in a very entertaining way to actually make sense. Also read, for example, business magazines. Also read, for example, books by Peter Lynch. Peter Lynch is a great teacher. And then I would also read, for example, books also by Benjamin Graham. So this is a great book to get started with. But then if you want to graduate into more detailed stuff, I would read Security Analyst by Benjamin Graham and David Dodd. It's also a great book. But yeah, focus more on hearing these people talk and understanding exactly the way they think. That's helped me out the most, because the way I learn is via a lot of like visual stuff and like listening, and then I can use what I learned here to kind of understand fully a book. But just diving into a complicated textbook doesn't help me that much. So that's why I tell you this. Now, number 2 is, think about investing as if it was, for example, like Olympic running. And you have, for example, in the Olympics, all these people, and they're all very, very good. And you're placing a bet on an individual to do very great, right? And obviously, even in the Olympics, you have people that are just uncommon amongst uncommon people. Like, they're amazing. But even those people have a limited shelf life as far as how long it's gonna happen for. Same thing with companies. You have companies that finally make it onto the stock market, which is a big deal, right? That's the Olympics. But even within the stock market, you have, for example, the S&P 500, which is basically the 500 largest companies, which is massive. But even within that, you have, for example, the ultra companies. So whenever you're going to be investing into companies, understand that you might have a very solid company, but if you pay too much money for a good company, you can turn any good company investment into a terrible investment, just depending on how much money you actually pay for it. You can overpay for something that's good. It's not like, oh, you can't overpay. No, you can overpay for an investment, even if this is a good company, okay? So always think about that. And always remember that Just like in the Olympics, there's always a little kid watching the Olympics and saying, I'm gonna beat that guy. Same thing with businesses and companies. There's always another business out there saying, I'm gonna train so hard, or I'm gonna build such a massive business that I'm gonna destroy all these other companies. And that's a real, legitimate threat to your investment. So it's always about thinking to understand that investing is never going to be a passive job. As far as, for example, investing into the stock market, because even once you buy a company, you still have to keep an eye on it to make sure that all the numbers make sense, because people change, right? Management might change, the CEO might go away, the products might deteriorate, the brand might lose is big thing about it. And on top of that, competition might come by and just basically erode the entire brand altogether. And then you thought you had this great company like Apple, or you thought you had this great company like Microsoft, and then all of a sudden here comes Apple, right? Which is also a big, massive company. My point is, always keep an eye on your investments. Guys, that's it, okay? I gave you all of these lessons, and these are lessons, guys, that although it just sounds like common sense stuff, these are the things that will really make you a better investor. And obviously, to be an investor, you need to understand some accounting, you need to understand some finance, but those things you can learn in a textbook. But these things right here, it takes a lot of books to get them, and I'm glad I can share with you guys just in one video. Thanks for watching. As always, like, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified, and comment down below your questions. And also use what was the secret thing that I said? I forgot. I forgot, but they probably remember. Comment down below bonus, so I know you made it all the way here, okay? Up here is another video. Over here is my face. Click subscribe. And as always, long-term team officially out.